Welcome back to The Heat. As U.S. President Donald Trump approaches his first 100 days in office, questions remain about how Trump is handling foreign policy. This week, the U.S. administration called for a review of the Iran nuclear deal, launched an investigation on steel imports, and put on notice U.S. companies that depend on foreign workers to meet their hiring needs. Let's get back to our panel right now. Let's go to Paris and Leila. Leila, let's talk about Iran. This was Secretary of State Rex Tillerson talking about that deal. Let's watch.
Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism and is responsible for intensifying multiple conflicts and undermining U.S. interest in countries such as Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon, and continuing to support attacks against Israel. An unchecked Iran has the potential to travel the same path as North Korea and take the world along with it.
So, Leila, is there a feeling that the United States is actually out of step here with its main partners in Europe? It wasn't that long ago that the United States and its allies in Europe, including France, signed that nuclear deal. It was seen as a major breakthrough. So what do people in France think of this now, hearing from the United States that they might reimpose sanctions?
Pretty much what Paris has always been thinking and what Brussels has been thinking too. I mean, remember, Rex Tillerson says this a day after the department says that Iran has actually complied with the deal. As always, you know, we're going to have a new president in Paris right now, and there is just no sense of where is this administration heading. On the one hand, Rex Tillerson talks about Iran being as dangerous as North Korea, but on the other, you know, Iran is in Syria. Iran is one of the parties in the Syria talks. So there's just no consistency on this.
Gianna, what do you make of it? Here we have the administration actually contradicting itself. You've got the State Department saying, yes, Iran is complying with all the terms of that deal that we signed. And we've got Rex Tillerson saying, well, we don't think so.
Well, I mean, we got to keep a couple things in mind. One, under the Obama administration, Iran received a $400 million payment, which we know that there was money seized from them in 1979, which is okay that it was seized from them. The fact that they're the #1 state sponsor of terrorism that our country has recognized for many years now, that would give anyone pause that why would we undermine ourselves by allowing the lifting of sanctions against not North Korea, but Iran, especially when they have new funding to legitimately allow for ISIS to destroy our country, which they've said that, and I'm talking about ISIS, which they said that they wanted to do time and time again. So when it comes to interagency review by the Trump administration, I think it's an appropriate idea. Donald Trump ran on the idea that he was going to rip the agreement up, especially considering the fact that they have not chosen to step back from their sponsoring of terrorism activity.
Well, the State Department says that they have. Brian, you want to comment on that?
Well, the State Department says Iran is in compliance. In December, President Obama, the White House, then announced that 98% of Iran's enriched uranium had been shipped abroad. In other words, there is no nuclear threat from Iran. And yet the Trump administration is reviewing sanctions, in other words, to put more sanctions on Iran. So what should we draw from this? Perhaps we should draw this, that the nuclear issue was always a phony issue, that in other words, nuclear compliance by Iran with a nuclear arms agreement actually isn't the thing that's driving U.S. policy. It's some other hostility towards Iran. So what we have the Trump administration now saying is that they're the #1 state sponsor of terrorism.
That has not been just the Trump administration mentioning that. That has been a known fact under previous administrations as well.
I'm sorry, I'm talking. If the United States
is going to, you're giving delusional conversation.
Is going to rip up
again, that's something that's unrecognized by previous administrations.
I mean, he can talk over me if he wants, but I mean, what's the point?
Yeah,
I mean, the point of the matter is the United States and 5 other countries, the P5+1, signed an agreement. Iran has gone along with it, has complied with it. The U.S. government has now decided that it has gone along. And the Trump administration is going to impose sanctions. France, Germany, Britain, Russia, and China should then know that the United States should not be expected to live up to its word because Iran has lived up to its word. The United States, not Iran, will be isolated under these circumstances.
Okay, Leila, you want to say something?
I do. I mean, and this is coming in the run-up to Iran's elections in June. So what average Iranians are seeing is that Washington basically wants a hardliner. And don't forget that Rouhani was voted with an overwhelming majority. In the Iranian context, he is seen as a moderate. And by undermining the progress that has been made on the diplomatic front, there really is a sense in Iran that Washington wants the sort of hardline position with which it can then renege on exactly all the deals that it has made, and any attempt to bring down the situation.
Okay, I'm going to turn to trade very quickly. Shindo, President Trump is again denouncing some of America's trade partners. On Thursday, in fact, accused Canada of destroying the U.S. dairy industry, and he's also ordered an investigation into steel imports into the United States. Let's listen to what the U.S. president had to say.
This has nothing to do with China. This has to do with worldwide, what's happening. The dumping problem is a worldwide problem.
So the United States imports, Shindo, something like a quarter of its steel needs from China, and yet we have the president there saying, we're going to carry out this investigation. It has nothing to do with China. Do you accept that it has nothing to do with China?
Well, absolutely, it has something to do with China, in the absolute terms, but also it involved other countries. That's also the fact. I think, among the 26% of the U.S. market share of steel, it's only like 2% that comes from China, so it's not a big deal. And also, the excuse for used by the Trump administration is really about the national security. So this is disputable, whether that's justified to cite national security. Basically, you have a military buildup, you need steel, you want your steel produced in your own country. Right. But look at the U.S. now shipbuilding and other, like military hardwares. The consumption of steel is about according to Reuters, 0.3% of the steel weight in the U.S. market, or steel produced in the U.S. because of the technology advancement. So it's actually using less and less steel. But it's a trade issue, but I'm not sure it's a national security issue here.
Okay. Brian, immigration. The president ordered a federal review of immigration policies, or work visas in this instance. What kind of an impact is that going to have?
Well, it's going to have a big impact on Indian students, and it's going to have an impact on Chinese students, and also on visa applicants from both of those countries. It's really more of a bark than a bite right now, because it's a review of visa policy. There's nothing really in it yet that we know for certain in terms of its impact. But you see the larger number of Indian visa holders of the H-1B visa and Chinese people. What's going to happen, I believe, is that the standards for who gets the visa will be based on high-performing employees, meaning high-paid employees. So those in the big tech companies, those who maybe are starting at a minimum wage of $125,000 will still get it. But if you're starting at $100,000, which many of the Indian and Chinese workers would be starting, you won't get the visa next time. So I think it's a point of big concern for Indian and Chinese visa holders. Again, what's really happening? Is this Indians and Chinese stealing American jobs, or is this demagogy where you can create sort of opposition or hatred towards others and blaming everybody else in the world for America's economic woes, or its unemployment rate, or the problems in its educational system?
Right, Gina, I've got 30 seconds. Very quickly, your response to this. As Brian poses the question, what is this about? Because if we look at the last few years, if we look at the number of immigrants who have come here, especially in that sector, the tech sector, most of the workers have been imported.
Well, I would think that this has to do with President Trump's comments that he was going to put every policy on the table and review it. If we look at the number of visas that were just recently issued, it was about 85,000. And as your other guest stated, as he rightly stated, 70% of them are Indian. So I'm not exactly sure what direction the administration is going with on this one. I don't know why you would put this particular policy on the table and how it's necessarily going to benefit America in that way. But again, he has the ability to do it and review it and make it better if he can.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us.